Across the polished obsidian floor of the Astrea Core receiving hall, the smell of wet earth preceded my new husband. A political marriage to a primitive Terran was a high monarch's mandate, an attempt to bridge the violent fringe worlds. I had braced myself for a brute draped in crude metals. Instead, the heavy doors parted to reveal a man carrying nothing but a battered leather rucksack. Just dirt and old leather. The rucksack he clutched was fraying at the seams, stained with the dust of a dozen dead systems. Instead of bowing, he simply looked at the vaulted ceiling, his gray storm eyes scanning the structural supports rather than the throne. I must confess, when they first mandated my union to the Terran, I feared his simplicity. I should have feared his history. That scent of damp soil lingered in the royal wing for 3 days. Silas Vane claimed the southern balcony as his territory. No servants were requested. No treasury accounts were accessed. Upon the pristine crystalline tiles, he constructed a row of terracotta pots, filling them with the dark matter he had hauled across the galaxy. The soil he tended with exhausting precision. I watched from the archway as he pressed a chemical strip into the date, analyzing the degradation rates. To my aethal guard senses, his obsession signaled a tragic biological ceiling. His species lacked the cerebral density for high-tier politics, so his mind sought comfort in mud. A simple creature, easily contented by menial labor. The Vorgath delegation arrives tomorrow, I warned him later, observing him through the glass. Their diplomat holds deep contempt for your kind. Do not speak unless addressed. Silas didn't look up from his pruning shears. The Vorgath usually don't like me, he replied, his tone utterly flat. I need to check the tomatoes before first light. The absurdity of prioritizing agricultural rotation over a diplomatic threat made my jaw tighten. My pity fractured the following cycle. While Silas worked outside, I inspected his quarters. Beneath his folded tunics lay the worn rucksack. Inside its main compartment, wrapped in protective cloth, sat a high-density data chip. The casing was pure forged carbon, etched with an unrecognized insignia and a single Terran phrase. Level 0 clearance. Required for access was a cryptographic key far beyond a farmer's capacity. Slipped into my royal cipher drive, the chip immediately triggered 3 separate quarantine alarms. Black lines of code cascaded across the holoscreen, locking out the palace network. From the balcony, the rhythmic scraping of his trowel continued. I stared at the flashing telemetry. The unspooling directory bore the title The Silence Protocol. It held 4,000 encrypted audio logs, each timestamped precisely 17 minutes apart. The ambient air dropped in temperature. From the decryption engine, a low hum vibrated, rattling the glass of my terminal. I looked toward the balcony. Silas knelt, wiping a smudge of mud off a clay pot with his thumb. His movements were deliberate, entirely lacking wasted energy. For the first time, I noticed heavy, parallel scarring along his forearms. A primitive mind does not carry military-grade carbon drives, nor do simple hands move with such lethal, calibrated economy. The sky above the Astrea Core ruptured in jagged purple tears. Sirens screamed through the royal spires. 100 Vorgath heavy cruisers materialized from hyperspace, instantly locking orbital targeting lasers onto the capital. My kingdom's defense grids failed in seconds. Total annihilation hung over our heads. Inside the shaking throne room, Cortez wept against the pillars. Beside the shattered glass of the balcony, Silas stood perfectly still. He was using a small wooden stick to carefully scrape a stubborn clump of wet potting soil from the deep treads of his boots. "Give us the Terran," rattled the Vorgath commander's voice from the hololiths. "Or burn." My husband finally dropped the stick. Down into the ancient subcellar he walked, ignoring the escape pods. I followed the heavy thud of his boots, watching him open the rusted palace vault. Black liquid metal crawled up his bare arms, forming the legendary void shell. The truth, I felt with crushing physical weight. His obsession with the garden was not the ceiling of a primitive intellect. It was a desperate tether. He cultivated delicate life because he was intimately acquainted with erasing it on a planetary scale. From the lower hangar launched a single civilian transport. Through my terminal, I tracked the impossible physics of his approach. The telemetry defied all known thermodynamics. To bypass the flagship's defensive grid, his ship initiated a dead space dock, venting all internal heat until the exterior hull matched the temperature of absolute zero in the vacuum. Mathematically invisible. I watched the readouts in pure, breathless horror. He was freezing his own blood to slip inside their perimeter. Through the hacked audio feed, the expected slaughter never came. Instead, the flagship's main propulsion drive died. Then the weapon banks. Then life support systems. In precisely 17 minutes, the most feared Armada in the outer sector became a graveyard of floating metal. The 7th operative did not fire a single kinetic round. On the command bridge, the silence was absolute. Picked up by the environmental audio sensors was a sharp clatter of a localized data slate hitting the deck. A junior officer named Valok, barely 3 cycles out of the academy, was hyperventilating. His armored hand shook violently against the navigation console as a black mass of the Terrans stepped out of the shadows. 40,000 souls on this fleet, Silas whispered, his voice artificially distorted by the helm. Your hidden shipyard coordinates of craft are loaded into my transmitter. Leave this system forever, or I broadcast them to the fringe syndicates. The cruisers retreated. They folded back into hyperspace without firing a single plasma pulse. Beneath the palace stones, the underground vault sealed shut. Resting against its heavy iron door sat the frayed leather rucksack. Its main flap hung open, exposing the bright glint of a Terran military medal buried beneath tiny, unplanted packets of tomato seeds. On the balcony, Silas knelt by the terracotta pots. Dawn crested over the Capitol spires, casting long shadows across the unbroken glass. I stood silently behind him, placing my hand over the warm swell of my stomach. The first green shoots pushed through the dark earth.